Major cultures. The people of Cygnar are the most sophisticated and cosmopolitan in all of Western Immoren. The society is far from homogeneous, however, but their nation is home to a diverse set of groups, philosophies, and religions. Cygnar welcomes outsiders and has opened its arms to refugees fleeing Lael and other communities disrupted by war. Cadorians and Menites are poorly trusted, though, especially in regions where people have been threatened or invaded by Cadorian forces or the Protectorate of Menoth. Many Cadorians living in Cygnar, particularly in communities along the Dragon's Tongue River, face increasing prejudice daily. Similarly, fewer Menite Cygnarans openly worship after the Caspian-Sul War. Ordinary citizens can find it difficult to separate the Protectorate as a nation from the unconnected Menite faiths with no ties to the theocracy. Cygnarans' tolerance for those different from themselves stems in large part to the circumstances of their nation's founding. 3 kingdoms and the remnants of a 4th comprise Cygnar, each a major power in the region before the coming of the Orgoth. Caspia, the Midlands, and Thuria were all subjected by the invaders for centuries, and it was only through cooperation that they rose up against the Orgoth entirely. Each was ruled by its own sovereigns in ancient times, and during the rebellion, prominent leaders from these proud old families represented these nations. They all agreed to the terms of the Corvus Treaties, submitting to a single sovereign rule from Caspia, the sole city to never fall to the Orgoth. Those who had once been the Midlands and Thuria were not pleased to be subordinate to Caspia, but their noble bloodlines were promised they would retain in power in Cygnar. The Moradane people constitute a very small but significant minority, and most do not consider their exclusion from the royal succession a slight, as their proudest bloodlines can attain significant ranks. While the descendants of all these people consider themselves Cygnarans now, cultural clashes and deeply ingrained prejudices still exist between them. Those of other regions expect Caspians to be arrogant and condescending. Caspians are traditionally distasteful of Moradanes. Thurians and Caspians view Midlanders as stubborn and lacking in imagination, but are themselves more at ease with the Moradanes, whose rustic ways they still respect. Thurians have a reputation in the east and south for being impractical, overly cerebral, and dishonest, but have always been friendlier than Caspians and Midlanders. Most cases, however, social class is more important in regional culture. Those who live in the city or the countryside understand others who do the same, and similarly those of more compatible wealth and station stick together. Modern Cygnarans are no strangers to strife, or civil strife, that is. Over the past 2 centuries, they have witnessed a religious civil war, the disposing of a tyrant, the coronation of a new king, and the restructuring of the entire Midland province. Their monarchy is subject to a clause unheard of in any other nation's government, Waldred's Covenant. The legal authority of a king to choose his own successor has rarely been invoked, although the law is merely meant to ensure stability in preventing the nation from being ruled by those unfit by dint of birth. In practice, the populace finds such a drastic shift in dynasties unsettling, and preferring the continuity of a prestigious royal family. For this reason, few kings have dared to name an heir of a lesser family lest they foment unrest. For all the struggles that the people of Cygnar have faced, they are the most free of any people in Western Immoren. They enjoy greater technological benefits and better working conditions. They rely more and more on mechanica and steam power, and with so much of their population now dwelling in greater cities, they have developed a cosmopolitan view of the world itself. Anarchists are respected members of society and face little prejudice in urban centers, though rural peasants and clergy continue to take a dim view on all practitioners of the arcane arts, sorcerers in particular. Cygnarans, most of them anyway, are at least accommodating of Trollkin, Gobbers, and Orgren who live among them, though it is not without some bigotry. In fact, many members of these other races consider themselves Cygnarans first, and members of their own Criels and tribes second, which some prejudiced outsiders find it difficult to reconcile. For most Cygnarans, patriotism is considered a virtue, and they remain hopeful for a better future. Having recently cast off a tyrant, they are resolved to resist would-be foreign invaders and despots, which extends to widespread independence and occasional resistance to authority. With threats coming in, however, from all sides, military enlistment is up, and young people are putting aside personal comforts and aspirations to defend their families. Caspians. As the nation's largest ethnic group, Caspians are varied, but certain aspects of Cygnaran life, cultures, and practices drawn from the southern regions and its long history are distinctly Caspian. They form the majority of people living across the southern half of the kingdom, including the coastal communities along the Gulf and the Broken Coast. Most Old Blood Caspians are more fair-skinned, but have a greater range of hair color, with brunette being the most being as common as blonde. Caspians are generally well educated, with high literacy rates, even in the smaller and poorer fishing communities. Better educated Caspians speak multiple languages depending on their work, although only historians and theologians bother to learn the archaic Caspian language itself. Caspians tend to have serious demeanors, even stern or judgmental attitudes, and are well suited for life in politics, the military, and religion. Caspians often have a keen understanding of the law and an intuitive grasp of social contracts, whether they choose to work with or around them. Caspian politicians and merchants know how to exploit loopholes as a result of imprecise language, for instance. Oration, philosophy, and logic are all political elements that are often have a greater impact than the appeals to emotion. Caspians have long been religious, and in modern times have taken to heart the philosophy of Morrow and belief in the limitless potential of the human soul. Their spirit of innovation reflects this, leading to many great Caspian engineers and mechanics, as well as talented individuals in the field of archaeology, painting, sculpture, and other science and arts. Caspians compete in these arenas with Thurians. The cities of Cyril and Caspia are rivals in more ways than one. In arts and entertainment, Caspians prefer more somber, serious subjects and themes, with tragedies and historical tales favored over farces. Most Caspians believe art exists to elevate the mind and to pay homage to great thoughts and deeds. Caspian cuisine relies on fish and poultry cooked with lightly spiced sauces. Beef is a luxury, at least to those for the lower classes. Caspian tastes may vary by region, with those living near Arjun communities in the southwest enjoying richer and spicier sauces. Caspians in the capital have access to a wide variety of both entertainment and cuisine, as the city has had a tremendous diversity of immigration from other cultures. This region has all manner of liquors, wines, and ales, although Caspians generally prefer the wine. Midlanders. As the second largest ethnic group in the kingdom, taking up the large central and northern regions, Midlanders are defined by their diversity. With families here drawn from just about every ethnicity in western Immoren, it is impossible to determine a Midlander from appearance alone, although on average they have darker skin and hair than most Caspians, and Thurians have thicker features and more solid frames. The region's culture is a congregation of elements drawn from elsewhere. Northern Midlanders have more in common with the Lilese than some of their southern Caspian countrymen, as reflected in the elaborate architecture and statuary of Corvus and many of their preferred foods and entertainment. This has increased as thousands of Lilese refugees have settled into northern Cygnar since the onset of war. Where Midlanders and the Rhine diverge is the temperament and problem-solving areas. Midlanders pride themselves on being practical and pragmatic, and they prefer direct solutions to their woes. The people of this region are famous for their stubbornness. It is said a Midlander set on a course is unlikely to veer away as a train is about to leave its rails. As with the Caspians of the south, the Immoren religion has deep roots with Midlanders, although they emphasize a different side of the faith. Midlanders are drawn to ascendants like Gonat, Sambart, Marcus, and Zolovan. who emphasize honest labor and self-sacrifice. Many Midlanders, particularly those in the south of Corvus, prefer simple entertainments and hearty cuisines. Most of their food combines sizable portions of meat with fresh baked breads and local produce, layered with thick gravies and sauces. Stews and roasts are common. Ales are preferred over wines. The people in Corvus tend to differ in their tastes, enjoying Lyallese-influenced cooking and more refined tastes. In music and other entertainments, even urbane Midlanders prefer hearing a small group play a rousing tune at local taverns over attending a grand symphony or opera. Moradhanes. The Moradhanes are a scattered people living in the smaller numbers throughout the Thurian and Midland regions. They are most comfortable in either rural or slightly wild regions and settle along waterways. Many who live in the North Forest Duchy, which is now occupied primarily by the Cadorians, and their communities persist in isolation despite the chaos in the region. Other Moradhanes immigrated south, adding to the number of refugees seeking new homes south of the Dragon's Tongue River. Moradhanes are somewhat recognizable by their short, wiry stature and their dark hair and eyes. The descendants of the ancient and ominous kingdom of Mord, most modern Moradhanes are a rustic people with no visible connections to that lost civilization. Two distinct groups live in northern Cygnar, loosely defined by whether they live in the heart of the Thornwood or in the vast swampy regions of the Bloodstone Marshes, or around the Blind Water Lake in the east. The latter have become accustomed to being referred to as swampies, not always a respectful term, but one which is now part of their self-identity. Swampies have their own distinct dialect, a variation of Cygnaran that includes older Moradhane terms. The uninitiated find it difficult to understand, but most Swampies can make themselves understood to outsiders if they speak slowly and carefully. Swampies are an insular group considered backward by many urban Cygnarans, but they also have lore about their home region and are better suited to exploring the dangerous marshes and bogs than anyone else in Cygnar. More so than most others, Swampies are comfortable negotiating with swamp gobbers, gatormen, and other inhabitants of the area. They have an adaptable diet that includes food many other Cygnarans would consider inedible or at least suspicious. They use all sorts of local meats, frog being the most favored, and they prefer complex soups or simple dishes roasted over an open flame. Moradhanes of the greater forest are sometimes disparaging of the Swampies. They have their own culture based on the city of Feling. The forest Moradhanes are similarly rustic but prefer to speak regular Cygnaran and are also skilled in the woods as their peers in the swamps and on the rivers. They have a reputation for courage and cunning in defending their region, using traps, ambushes, and knowledge of the local terrain to fight off greater numbers of better armed enemies. As Cador occupies most of this region, those who remained kept a low profile and avoid trouble at all costs. Some have offered the Cadorians their services as guides, but most avoid direct contact and grudgingly cooperate because to do so otherwise would risk their lives. Although both groups of Moradhanes are predominantly Moravian, their customs vary widely from those in other regions of the nation. Moradhanes treat both the forest and the swamp with healthy respect, almost as if the land themselves were alive, and they are prone to anthropomorphizing things such as plant life, streams and rivers, and even their own weapons. This is usually done in jest, but the custom is deeply ingrained. Despite these and other habits that Southerners find odd, Moradhanes are valued as scouts and guides, and both the Cygnaran Reconnaissance Service and the armies safeguarding the border regions openly welcome their service. Thurians. While third in population, the Thurians consider themselves as essential to Cygnar's unique spirit and historical accomplishments as Caspians themselves, if not more so. They occupy the bulk of the northwest region and down the western coastline. Sorel is considered the other axis of Cygnaran civilization, the heart of Thurian culture. While its people are not as diverse as Midlanders, Thuria as an old kingdom embraced other cultures, and thus its people are varied in size and shape, though they are predominantly pale-skinned with red hair, which is a common look. Many former Cynarians and Radzis families settled here in ancient times, leaving a legacy of dark-skinned and dark-haired people who are just as proud to be Thurian. Even the many Thurians living in smaller, less sophisticated townships and villages appreciate their heritage and emulate Sirel. More so than any other Cygnaran ethnic group, they see themselves as Thurian first and Cygnaran second, retaining their ancient language so that many of them are fluent in both Thurian and Cygnaran. Thuria was an intellectual center during the Thousand Cities era, and Caspia was becoming well known for its orators, philosophers, mathematicians, and other freethinkers. It embraced the message of Morrow, though the words of Thamara have penetrated just as deep. The concept of questioning all things is seen as a Thurian trait. The region has long had a more permissive attitude towards different lifestyles and religions based on more accepting interpretations of the Morrowian doctrine. Locals insist they are as good-natured and benevolent as Cygnarans everywhere, but with a strong undercurrent of corruption in Sorel and everywhere else that persists. Thuria's criminal circles and the Thamarite cults are well organized with real power, although they tend to keep low profiles. Thurians are also proud of their role in origins of organized magic before the rebellion. Those in these professions emphasize this more than others, who feel mystical practices are only a fraction of the region's history. Nonetheless, this underscores the Thurian thirst for knowledge, which includes the latest gossip and news as well as plumbing the depths of history. They prize educational institutes and great libraries, and a Thurian can increase his social stature by obtaining the proper universities or socializing with the intellectia. Thurians have a less serious and more diverse appreciation for art and entertainment than the sober-minded Caspians do. Thurians enjoy theater with a fondness for farce and comedy, as well as parodies, festivals, and other excesses for pageantry. Because Thurians extends to the South Ord, the people enjoy traditional Auric activities like sports and games of chance. They have incorporated many Auric customs as general, as well as Auric goods, foods, and alcohols and other wares. Thurian cuisine favors ornate dishes and multiple courses with smaller portions. They enjoy a wide variety of fish and local game in addition to meats imported from the Midlands or Ord. Most people of this region eat their largest meal at lunch, followed by a small supper. Thurians appreciate alcohol, slightly preferring stronger liquors over ale and wine.